Wake Up with Giants. We'd like to welcome you all here to the show, Shine All the Time. We've got a special guest who's my dear friend, Andrea Owen. Andrea is the author of 2 books. Andrea, do you want to tell us what your books are?
3.
3. Oh my gosh, 3. Go ahead.
It's been a minute since we've talked.
Yeah.
They're right behind me if you can kind of see. So 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life came out when I lived near you. And then How to Stop Feeling Like SHIT. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that word on your show. Okay. How to Stop Feeling Like Shit came out in 2018. And then Make Some Noise just came out this last summer in August of 2020. Oh my God, what year was it? 2021. That was my last book, Make Some Noise.
Make Some Noise. Yeah. So I am like super thrilled. I feel like we've manifested this years ago that we so a little bit about how I know Andrea. She lived here in Utah and we met through, I think, a Pilates group.
I think so. Yeah. You watched my kids for a little while and then we became better friends.
When she was doing her first book, I watched her beautiful kids and she's just been like such an inspiration to me. We also ran Ragnar together.
We did. And you also used to spray tan me. So you've seen a lot of me.
I've seen all of you. I know all of the things, which makes me love you even more. So we have this history together and now she's just like got an amazing podcast shows. Like, tell us what you're doing.
So I started my podcast back in 2013. I was a bit of an early adopter is when I was still living in Utah. And that's been fun. It was called Your Kick-Ass Life for a long time. It's recently changed over to the name Make Some Noise with Andrea Owen. And I speak on stages and coach women, the occasional gay man, which is super fun, but mostly women. And it's just been a wild ride. Yeah. Raising 2 kids. We moved to North Carolina and the weather's better, but I miss people like Natalie. And I'm just excited to be here to talk about all things writing books and publishing or women's empowerment. I'm game for whatever.
Yeah, I love all of those topics. And I just I think it's funny how people come into each other's life, you know, and like you met me. So I'm just going to go with it and we'll just flow because like your story is so special to me. Like you met me when I was going through my divorce and was just such like a solid like person in my life. And in my children's life too. I think my children, like my girls babysat for you, right?
Yep, I did.
And really looked up to you. And I know that you have molded them in ways too. So you are just so empowering and activating to people. Like your voice is what I love is that when you speak, people listen. And I always talk about magic and like the word abracadabra means we create as we speak. And so I feel like when you speak, you create, like you activate, you know, women. That's my intuition.
I love that. I love that explanation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So what are you currently speaking anywhere like publicly or are you just mostly doing,
Mostly just talking to myself.
I love it.
No. Well, the podcast is a big outlet for that, but also I've been loving, it's almost a little bit embarrassing, but I'm going to own it. I've been loving the platform TikTok. It's so fun and entertaining and educational. And I do a lot of comedy over there. Like it's called Traumedy. Where it's like you kind of you have a sense of humor about your own trauma, which I feel like I have to personally, and I make a lot of jokes about therapy, and which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. So that's been fun.
I love your jokes because we all feel that way.
Yeah, it just is kind of the truth of it. But in all seriousness, I am a huge fan of the internal work and healing and therapy and things like that. But yes, I'm actually speaking in Florida coming up in May at a conference. Which is fine because Florida is acting like there's, you know, the pandemic isn't happening. So if you're going to go anywhere to be in public, go to Florida.
Yeah.
Utah is similar. Yeah. But I'm excited about that. And then we're hoping that things pick back up. The last couple of years have been terrible in terms of live events. So I've just been mostly head down writing books.
Yeah, I love your TikToks. They're so funny. And I'm loving TikTok too. You always inspire me, which is
good.
Yes. And
glad.
so tell me what made you, what I know your story, but for others that don't know and those watching, what drove you to want to write your first book?
It was a few things. I think maybe a better question to start with is give you a little bit of context of like how I got into the industry. So my background is actually in fitness. I have a degree in exercise physiology and worked in the fitness industry, both on the gym floor as a personal trainer and corporate for a really great organization that certifies personal trainers and health coaches, et cetera, when I was living in San Diego. And I was actually working with personal training clients who all of my clients were women. And I was noticing that they were coming to me, and you like with a background of a hairdresser, similar story. Like people come and kind of like pour their guts out and tell me these things, like the places that they were lacking confidence and the struggles in their life and the places that they felt stuck. And I wanted to help them more than just telling them how many miles they should run and how many reps and sets they should do. That's what brought me to coaching. I've always been sort of the consummate cheerleader, and I'm just enthusiastic.
Yes.
As part of it's like a coping mechanism, right? Yes. Part of it's a coping mechanism from trauma, but a lot of it is just really naturally how I am. Right. And so we moved to Utah in 2011. And we had 2 babies, and I decided I needed to get sober. I was what we call a high bottom alcoholic. Right before we moved, I was up to about a bottle of wine a night, like by myself, like on weeknights. And my husband doesn't drink. So it was just me, like by myself. Like it wasn't like any special occasion. It just was 4 or 5 glasses of wine every night. I knew where I was headed, and it wasn't good. So I got sober, and it was only a few months after that where I sat up in bed one morning and I looked over at my husband and I said, I'm going to write a book. I'm tired of just talking about it, because it had been something that I'd wanted to do since I was young, and I didn't know what it was going to be about. I knew it was going to be something around women's empowerment, but I didn't have like a solid idea yet. I knew I just had to run with it. And I don't know if you know this, Natalie, but I have a crazy manifesting story about that. Do you want me to tell you?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a coach probably around that time, and she was a huge influence around the law of attraction. And she had this journal that it was hers. It was a printed journal, and I wrote in it every morning. And one of the questions, it was a prompt, and it said, wouldn't it be awesome if? And then you filled in the blank. And she encouraged me to do like, not things like, wouldn't it be awesome if they were in stock at the grocery store of chicken and a biscuit, which is like, I know we share mutual love for chicken and biscuit. Yeah. But it's like, but it's big things. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if the IRS forgot that they owed us $20,000 and we got a check? Wouldn't it be awesome if, my husband got a promotion and now makes multiple 6 figures or something like that? So I wrote one day, wouldn't it be awesome if a publisher reached out to me and wanted to publish my book? That was around October it must have been 2012. And then I started blogging about my, this is back when like blogs were still really big. I was blogging about my journey of writing this book and how it was scary and how I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it anyway. And a small publisher stumbled upon my blog and like found me on Twitter or something. And she liked my vibe and said, hey, do you have a publisher yet? I'd be interested in reading more about your project. And I was like, is this a scam? Like at first I thought it was totally a scam. Yeah. And it wasn't. And she was a real editor from a real publisher. And they ended up publishing my first book, which is unheard of. That is the exception.
Right. You are the exception. So.
Still blows my mind, that story.
It's magic. Like if you think, I mean, in my terms, you know what I mean? But like, and I feel like, I mean, part of your purpose here, like our messages need to get out. Like we have a purpose and you're a trailblazer for women. Like I said, you've been an inspiration to me. And I just like, and I don't mean that like to put you on a pedestal. I mean that from
I don't take it that way.
No, I know. Just for everybody else. Like, it's just been like, you're such a down to earth, beautiful woman, and you're very vulnerable and authentic in your story. And you're 100% real and raw. And like, that's what makes your TikToks and your books like so entertaining, because that you're just you, and like your energy alone, like I love being with you. And so I always say that people are activating, you know what I mean? Like you activated so much in me. And even though I wasn't like at a time in my life where I could do even what I'm doing now, it was always like the goal. And I was always like, I would tell about women that inspired me, like my friend Andrea Owen, and then there's this person and this person. And you're like definitely one of those people. So way to like live your purpose.
Thank you. Well, it's so interesting. Like I do feel, you know, that things happen for a reason. And I think one of the main reasons that we ended up in Utah was for me to get sober. I think there was a few circumstances like you have to go to like the state liquor store to get wine, which was different in California. And there was all these kind of things that sort of shifted when we had moved in with my parents and lived in their basement for a few months when we first got there. And it was like really throwing a wrench in my afternoon wine drinking. And so there was like these things that happened that really put me on the path to sobriety. And what's funny is, you know, I didn't have that many friends when I lived there. It was tricky for me, I think, not coming from the culture that you all grew up in. I felt like a lot of the women saw something in me that they liked and saw something about themselves that they wish they had more of. But most of the women held me at like an arm's length. And no one was ever mean to me, but I had a really hard time making friends there. Like you and two other people were the only people that I was friends with. And the reason I bring that up is because the other two ended up leaving their marriages not long after they met me. And I was like,
well, I actually did too.
Like, I know. you and I wonder,
and I got remarried for a second.
You did.
And alcohol was like a thing, you know? So then
I wonder, like, did I do something? Did I like spread some vibration
us of who we are? Like you reminded us. We are mirrors to each other.
Right. And I think there's some of that, like without actually saying it. I think what one of my superpowers is like reminding. I want women to see a reflection of themselves when they look at me in whatever that looks like. It's not going to be necessarily like me or act like me or sound like me. It's whatever their truth is. That's what I hope to do.
And you do that. So I just keep doing what you're doing. One thing I wanted to bring up, like in your first book, I remember handing several copies out. I would keep it in my salon because, you know, when I was talking to my clients, this kind of stuff would come up, and where I was like still just diving into my healing, and I didn't even know that I liked to drink or anything because for so long in my religion and in my first marriage, we didn't do that. And then the second marriage, like bless everybody's soul, but you know, I was like, oh my gosh. So I was able to like look at you as an example, like I've said, but I like in your book, do you refer to yourself as a lipstick alcoholic?
No, but I've heard that before. No, I call it a high bottom alcoholic, meaning like I don't have a rock bottom story. That's, you know, I didn't go to jail. I didn't have a DUI. My marriage didn't fall apart. It's also called functional alcoholic, meaning like we still do our job and like are decent parents, but we're just like slowly killing ourselves.
Yeah, it seems like I just remember reading and I'm visioning it like you like in your closet at one point, like, and maybe that's just how I see it like in my head, but like down to a bottle of wine and just going, okay, this is like, this can't happen. Like, this is, I don't know, that part stuck out to me big time.
Yeah, it's you know, there's that, you know, that feeling where you realize you need to make a massive change. Like, you know, maybe like it's been kind of bugging you, but then you have this sort of conscious moment of like, I need to leave my marriage, or I need to ask my adult child to move out, or I need to quit drinking, or, you know, whatever it is, or I need to, you know, leave the church, whatever it is. Like, I call that the tipping point. Like when you realize you need to make a change, but you're terrified to do it. And a lot of people stay there for a long time. And I'm not like, you know, crapping on those people. Like you need to give yourself the process that you need to go through. What I want to acknowledge is how painful that is. And I was there for not maybe a handful of months, but it was excruciating knowing that I was not living a life in alignment with my values and like who I really wanted to be.
Yeah. So what was your first step? Did you go to AA, or I don't remember like what? Okay. That was your first step. It's kind of coming back to me.
I went to AA. It might have even been like before I met you, but
Yeah.
it was at an Alamo Club, which I didn't even know what that was. And I'm going to tell you something, like I was so elitist about it. Like I wore my $200 coat with like my designer jeans. And I was like, if I'm going to go and admit that I have a problem with alcohol, at least I'm going to look amazing.
That's what I
And,
love about you.
and there was like a homeless guy outside and like in a wheelchair. And I'm like,
You're like, I am not this.
I am not this person. But at the end of the day, I am. Like I'm not that different and I'm not that far away from that person. And so I had a huge ego check. And I met some of the most amazing, creative, kind people. And my favorite meeting actually was the gay and lesbian AA meeting every Wednesday night. Straight people were welcome too. But I mean, they just were rad people. And I credit them for my sobriety, at least in the beginning.
I so love that. I just got chills. So you know how spiritual I am and how not woo-woo, okay, just but I've always said that gay people, like for some reason I've just had this belief that gay people were sent to earth as angels to teach us how to unconditionally like love each other. Not looking at gender, not looking at
right. Yeah, and I think especially the people there who the majority of them grew up in a very strict religion that told them that gay people were terrible. So my heart goes out to them having to grow up knowing that about themselves. Like no wonder they were alcoholics, like
right.
And a lot of them didn't come out until they were well into adulthood. There was a couple of people who, got married and had children and came out much later. And so I just always found their story so fascinating and also heartbreaking. And I loved being around them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It was a little tangent. Was that here in Utah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, wow. Like
they're walking among you, Natalie.
Oh, I know. I just
wondered.
I know. They are me probably.
Yeah. Same.
So, and then I know that I babysat your little babes who are now like, tell me how old your kids are.
My son is 14 and my daughter's 12.
Yep. And they're amazing.
They are. They're good kids.
Yeah. So I can't believe it's been that long. Like I'm a little bit tripping here.
I know, it flies.
But so then you guys moved to North Carolina?
We did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In 2014. Yeah, we moved to North Carolina. We've been here.
And then you did your second book, which is
How to Stop Feeling Like Shit.
Okay, and tell me what that one's about. I need to order these. I'm sorry.
That one's actually sold a ton of copies. That one's done really well. It is essentially, it's a book for women about the 14 habits, behaviors that we do to try to avoid criticism, judgment, failure, shame. So it's things like people pleasing, perfectionism, numbing out, isolating, overachieving, the being strong identity. So all of those kind of behaviors that work for a little bit, they work until they don't.
Yeah. I think part of healing is peeling off those onion layers or digging deeper down into that spiral. And so those are great things like that can get us like around the surface. But as we dig deeper and deeper, then it gets so much harder. And like, you're like, whoa. And so do you have any experiences like around that, or like, does your book talk about it or?
A little bit. Mine, I just am not trained as like, to talk about like mental health and, I'm not a therapist. And so, but I encourage people to go, and my life coaching clients, I think probably all of them, most of them at least, are working in tandem with a therapist. Okay. But I think that, yeah, we go in cycles, exactly like you said. We think that like, oh, okay, I'm really working on this particular thing. And then you're, walking along feeling great in your life, and then something else comes up. Something might come up with one of our children or our partner, or our parent might say something and we're like, like triggered, and then we have to like go back to therapy. It's like I find myself going back to therapy quite often.
I love your therapy videos because we don't hate it, but it's just like, okay, therapist, like.
Yeah, my husband and I kind of go in spurts going to therapy together, like marriage counseling.
Mhm.
It's been a couple years since we went, but I finally got to the point where I'm like, we need to go have lunch together or dinner or whatever, like beforehand, because a lot of times we would go afterwards and we would be
Mm.
like, I think I want to kill you. Like,
Thank you for like admitting that, because that's such a real thing.
yeah. I think we all need a little help. Like marriage is hard. Like it's no joke. Like we bring in all of our old patterns. Like as much as we try not to, we bring a lot of our broken heart from previous relationships, whether it's, our family of origin stuff, previous spouses, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not fair to bring that into your relationship, but a lot of it is unconscious. So we have to go to
And we
therapy
don't
to
know
talk
until
about
it
it.
unravels, So I
Mhm.
love your guys' marriage. How is Jason, by the way?
He's so good. He's really
such a
good. He's going to be
kind.
50. I know.
I just remember he's so cool. Like, he was always awesome picking up the kids, and then didn't he longboard too?
Skateboard. Yeah.
A
Uh-huh.
skateboard. And then
Yeah.
honestly, to put up with, or not, I don't want to say put up, but be with women like us, like you have to be like, and like how awesome that you found somebody like that. So one thing that I know that really like active, like, okay, I'll stop saying activated. Really like, you were
Supported.
coaching me without coaching me was the narcissist thing. Cause I
Mhm.
remember that you had prior to Jason. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk about that a little bit, or any
Yeah,
advice?
it's so interesting. The whole narcissist topic is happening a lot, especially like in the social media world. And statistically, it's impossible that there are that many people out there who are narcissists. But what's really interesting is that for men especially, I have come to realize that. So my ex-husband had an affair with our neighbor and got her pregnant. And this was right when we were discussing having our first child. This was in 2006. And just before I met Jason.
Yeah.
And so we divorced. And then I started dating someone who I thought was Mr. Right. And turns out he had cancer. And then fast forward several months, it turns out he never had cancer. He had lied about it to cover up his drug addiction. So that guy, I do think, was a malignant narcissist and borderline sociopath. Like the lengths that he went to, and like it's such a bigger story. But my former husband, the one that had an affair with our neighbor and got her pregnant, I don't actually think he was a narcissist. I think he just grew up in a culture that
Mm.
taught him that he was entitled to whatever he wanted and whoever he wanted. And that's what our culture teaches boys and men. And that, and I'm generally speaking here. I know that there are
Right.
exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
and that some men grow up with a little bit more support around understanding gender roles and just inequality for men and
Mm-hmm.
women. But I do think that he just felt like, why should I just have one woman? Like
When there's a whole
so
world full of women.
that was rough to go through that, but
Yeah.
we weren't a good match, and my intuition was telling me the whole time I was married to him.
Yeah, I remember so many of your stories that I was like, I could just relate to. And so, I mean, we all meet people for a reason. And like, did it teach you to listen to your intuition and trust that more?
Mhm.
And so,
100%. Yeah, and
mhm.
it's that's one of the things I've been working on over the last decade and a half is trust, both trusting myself and trusting other people, because I walked out of those two relationships with no trust for anyone. I don't, I probably, and Jason knows this, like I probably got married too soon. And, I was a few years into our relationship and I'm like, I don't know if I trust you. And he had done zero things to make me not trust him. It was just the trauma of what I had been through. I threw walls up and I was like, nobody's getting down these. Even like my best girlfriend, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
nope, I like you a lot,
Yeah.
but I don't trust you with my whole heart. Like that's
Yeah.
the difference, is like with my whole heart. No.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the hardest touch points, at least for me, in my
Yeah.
intimate relationships.
Thank you for sharing. So here you are again, right at the right time. So what, and so now are you, I don't want to say healed because we're always growing, but like, how do you handle things differently? Like, what is your inner guidance system? Or
Well, I have a way better set of skills in terms of communication. So previously, if I was upset about something, I would get passive aggressive and sarcastic with my husband. For instance, I'll give you like a easy example. So Jason loves to leave his shoes everywhere. He does a lot of things right, but if it's one thing that like drives me nuts is that like, and we have shoe baskets throughout the house, but he leaves his shoes in other places. So I would say something like, "Oh no, it's okay. I'll pick these up. You just stay where you are. Are you comfortable? I'm going to go ahead and put your shoes away." Like stuff like that. And it's just like, and usually when I do that, when I catch myself doing that, it's because I'm upset about something else. Right. And I just want to like dig, like let him know that I'm mad.
Which Jason's like, so like, would never even treat. I mean, not that
he's the sweetest.
Yeah.
But I mean, he has his like poor communication as well. Like he's an avoider, you know, like I don't know how much you know about attachment styles, but I am an anxious attachment style person. And he's an avoidant. And typically anxious people are attracted to avoidance. So we tend to like interrogate. We also get a little panicked if there's an argument or our partner gets quiet. We run towards. And avoidants are the opposite. They shut down. They avoid. They often like will walk away from people or arguments, conversations. And so it becomes like this circle that we do. And so like a secure, right. So a secure, where you want to be, it's called securely attached. So for me, I have learned to not panic when we have a disagreement. I just don't. I just know that he's not going anywhere and that we can work it out. I also am able to give him space because that's how he likes to work things out instead of demanding that he talk to me right now. It's just not how his nervous system works. Right. I also have learned to admit when I'm wrong and say, I'm sorry if I've been a total jerk about something, which was hard.
Yeah.
And admit like if I've been triggered around something that is like my old relationship stuff, I've had to be like, okay, this doesn't have anything to do with you. And I'm super triggered about something and I'm sorry that I acted out and here's what's going on for me. So just a whole new set of communication skills that I never had before.
I love that. So this, because I'm, still single. So I'm just going to pick your brain a little bit because what I've noticed is there's like this effing trend going on here within the single world. And I think it changed a lot during COVID where like people just got to this point where it's like, well, you haven't dealt with your stuff and you still need to heal. And are we ever like fully healed? Like, I know we shouldn't go into a relationship with these things, like what you're talking about. I'm also an anxious style, I would definitely say. I think we shared like that in common.
Yeah.
So like when I think I'm healed, like I've done the work and I've done the therapy and I'm good. And then somebody will come along that triggers me because I am attracted to that opposite like style. And then I'll like work through it the way that I was taught to. But then it's like, people tend to blame it on like, well, you haven't healed. You need to, or you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't. My short answer is I don't think we're ever healed. And people who claim to be, I would be very suspicious of them. It's like, I'm like, what are you hiding? If you're not willing to continue to evolve throughout the rest of your life, I don't think that that's realistic. I think we all come to a place where we grow and we stretch. And like I just said, like I've learned this whole new set of communication skills. But who knows if I was in a relationship with someone else, I think a lot of personal development is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So like I might tumble backwards if I was with somebody new where I don't know their nuances and I don't know their body language and facial expressions and responses and things like that. So I think what people need to do, and I don't know if this is helpful for you, Natalie, or anyone who's single, and whether you're in a single or in a relationship, you have to know like what your deal breakers are. So like for me, a deal breaker would be like I need somebody who believes in the same things as me, like morally and politically. I think that we're at a place in our lives where That really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a deal breaker for me for someone who is unwilling to go to therapy, whether by themselves or with me. It's also a deal breaker for somebody who's unwilling to admit when they're wrong and see their part in things.
Yeah.
So make your list. What are yours? And talk about them on like the second or third date.
Really? Okay. This is helpful. I'm like,
Don't
really
take
give
my
me some
advice for,
dating
like,
advice.
dating.
Just kidding. I'm not. What did you say? Sorry.
I haven't dated since like 2006, and I had like a slut phase, which I'm not apologizing for, but it wasn't really dating.
Hey, I own it. I'm
more like sleeping around. I'm glad I had it.
Right, because everything melts us, right?
And it was fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's whatever. So one thing that I was what triggered me when you were saying that, and that was super helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Sometimes I feel like these shows are like my therapy sessions. So
good.
I did a therapy session with you. No, just kidding. But like, not to make it about me, right? But we can only like express our own experiences. And in my experience too, there's been a lot of talk, like especially recently, about people with attachment style. Like, so like we want to, like, it's one of the limbs of yoga, like non-attachment, and like a lot of therapists and authors and stuff are writing about that. And it's a step of, the healing journey. Do you have a stance on attachment?
100%. Like, I get a little suspicious, or maybe that's not the right word I'm looking for. Maybe I get irritated at sometimes these experts who say that they're at that place of like non-attachment, and I'm like, are you a robot? Like, because I do this work all day, every day.
Experience is to experience love, which is you're attached. Obviously.
So I think the thing to look at is I'm a big fan of the work of Harv Hendricks, and he wrote a book. He's written several books, but the one that I'm thinking of is called Getting the Love You Want. And that one, I believe, was one of his first books. And that's about for people who are in relationships. And he wrote a book very similar to that, but from a singles perspective, called Keeping the Love You Have, or something like that, something similar to that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you quickly what his theory is.
Okay.
And he's been like a marriage therapist for decades. Same with John Gottman. I am a huge fan of him and his wife, Dr. Julie Gottman. They are brilliant when it comes to relationships and communication, et cetera. So Harv Hendricks, in his book, Getting the Love You Want, his theory is this, that when we are young, we're very little, we develop an unconscious persona in our minds that is made up of the positive and negative characteristics of our primary caregivers. So this is usually our parents.
Oh, God.
Right. The good things and the not so good things about our parents. And again, totally unconscious. So we grow up and we start to date and be attracted to people. And unconsciously, when we meet someone, we go through that list of criteria that is that persona. He calls it an imago, IMAGO. It's an imago.
Okay.
And the closer that person is to your imago, the more attracted you are to them. That's why we find ourselves in relationships with people that are a lot like our fathers. Or if you're a man, you might find yourself in a relationship with someone who's a lot like your mother. And this is exactly what has happened in my marriage. And that's not a bad thing necessarily.
I was going to say, is that bad?
No. Where it gets bad is when you are unconsciously trying to heal your childhood wounds through your partner. It is not their job. And when you can pinpoint what it is that, so I'll give you an example. I'll give you a personal example. My father was kind and stable and somewhat passive. He let my mom be the boss, but he was also a little passive aggressive and emotionally detached. That is my husband.
It's so interesting because I know you have such a love your relationship with your dad, and we don't have to go into that right now, but I know that your dad.
Yeah. Well, he had great things and he had not so great things, like all people. And so what I unconsciously am trying to heal is to get that emotional attachment from my husband, which is not a bad thing, right? Like of course I want to be emotionally attached to my husband. However, what I also need to work on is this feeling of abandonment that I had from my father. And, that he didn't show up for me in ways that I wanted to have him support me and see me and love me. And so they're two separate things. And that's what we need to learn how to do, is separate those two, which a lot of times we don't. And that's where we get in trouble.
Yeah. So that I can see like how we would do that, because we don't really probably recognize it until it pops up, first of all.
Right. And, I wonder for you, Natalie, like I'm thinking about, the untimely death of your brother, and like how that affected you. I'm just like one example of something traumatic in your life, of, him departing, and whatever kind of role he played in your life. There might be ways that you're trying to fill that through your romantic partners.
He was my protector. And now I'm like, what the fuck do I need protection against?
Right. And so here's the interesting thing about that. So like logically, like here in your brain, you might say that, and it doesn't make any sense, right? But it's not that part of your brain where you're going into these relationships with. Like, it's the lizard part of your brain that's way back here in the limbic system that still thinks you need protecting. That still is like that little girl or that young adult that lost her brother or had whatever daddy issues you had.
I don't even know my real dad. I know. I'm one of those.
Okay. Forgot about that. Yeah. So
but I appreciate you remembering that, because it's came up even recently, and I thought I healed a lot around that. And then,
which you probably have.
I have, yeah, for sure. And I picked different types of people and stuff like that. But I feel like we all want to be protected in a sense that our feelings are safe with the people that we love.
Sure.
And so
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and I'm like, we
just got started.
So I'm going to invite you to come back in the future, because this is so helpful to so many people. And I feel like I am connected to so many single women, and not that you're not about single women, but like, what I mean?
Work with single women. Yeah.
I know you do. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant like, I don't know. But anyways, I want to offer that. I said that wrong. But I want to talk about your last book, Make Some Noise. Give us a briefing on that.
So that one came about because I'm mildly obsessed with getting to the root of the problem when it comes to anything. I'm like, let's just like the fastest way to fix this. And what I realized is that most, if not all of the topics that I talk about on a regular basis around women speaking up about, even things like money or how we view sex in our relationships, et cetera, comes down to how we were raised, and culturally how we were raised, and how women are particularly taught to be quiet, be polite, be pretty, put everyone else's comfort before our own, and definitely don't rock any boats, don't go against the grain, don't make a scene. And it's not that I'm telling people like you need to flip tables and flip people off. Like, no. But like, let's look at what we learned. And a lot of it's unconscious, and start to unlearn that in ways that feel good to us and that make us feel empowered.
And so what, like really quickly, like unlearning that, you have a process like in your book or in your coaching?
Yep. It's the same 4 questions at the end of every chapter. And so the first place you need to do is just pay attention. Like you have to pay attention to, so for instance, if you find yourself judging a woman who's like in her 40s and, wearing a mini skirt and a crop top, ask yourself, like, I wonder why I think that way about her. Like, I wonder why I'm making fun of her. Like, what is it the society tells me about 40-something-year-old women that makes me judge her? Like, I'm not saying like you need to go and like support her and give her a high five, but just get curious. Like, why do you think you're judging her? So notice when you're doing things. Second step is to get curious, ask yourself why. Third step is self-compassion. Because then you might start like beating yourself up for it and being like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible human being. I'm so judgmental. And it's like, no, you're just a human.
Instead of realizing like, oh my gosh, I was shamed for that, and that's why I'm now mirroring or projecting whatever that in other people.
Exactly. So that's a great example. Thank you. And then the last step is to keep the momentum. And so that basically, like, I encourage people to have conversations with their girlfriends, to, ask their mom questions about what they learned, what their views are, just to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and was that last
it.
one?
Keep the momentum. So it was pay attention, get curious, self-compassion, and keep the momentum.
Yep. Okay, perfect. And so if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you? And are you still doing coaching stuff?
I am. So everything's at AndreaOwen.com. If somebody wants to send me a DM, the best way to get a hold of me is Instagram. I'm at Hey Andrea Owen on all social media platforms.
Okay, Andrea, thank you.
Thank you,
so
babe.
Good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And if you're not following Wake Up with Giants TV on YouTube, go ahead and follow them and join Tribe of Giants on Facebook. And thank you so much, Andrea. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you
everybody.
soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.